I was sitting on a park bench when it all happened. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding. My hands were trembling. The world around me began to blur, then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, a woman was trying to remove a ring from my wrist. "What are you doing?" "This is a gift from my son," I told her. She stopped and looked me straight in the eye. "That ring isn't what you think it is," she said firmly. "And your son isn't who you think he is either. I'm incredibly grateful you're here. Before this story unfolds, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment and let me know your city or country. One important note before we continue: some elements of this story have been fictionalized for narrative clarity and impact. Any resemblance to real individuals or events is coincidental, but the lesson you'll hear is completely genuine. Now let's begin. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of my lecture hall at Chicago State University, casting long shadows across empty rows of seats. I stood at the podium reviewing my notes for the day's class, though my mind wasn't really on the material. It rarely was anymore. 60 years old. That was the number that kept echoing in my head lately. 60 years, and most of it felt like it had slipped through my fingers without me really noticing. My name is James Mitchell, and I teach biology here, specifically cardiovascular systems and human physiology. It's work I've loved for nearly 35 years. The science fascinates me. The way the human body works, the intricate dance of cells and systems, the miraculous machinery of life itself. But somewhere between my first lecture hall and now somewhere between young ambition and quiet middle age, I'd realized that understanding how the heart works on a cellular level doesn't teach you how to keep it from breaking. My wife Margaret used to sit in these halls sometimes. Not in class, she respected my professional space, but she'd come by during lunch and we'd talk about the day. She'd laugh at my jokes about mitochondria and tell me about her work as a librarian at the university. She had this way of making everything feel less lonely. Everything felt fuller when Margaret was in the room. That was 3 years ago. I glanced at the clock. Students would arrive in 20 minutes. I adjusted my papers, straightened the lab equipment on the demonstration table, and tried to push thoughts of Margaret aside. It was a routine I'd perfected over the last 3 years: push the grief down, lock it away, focus on work. Work was safe. Work didn't remind me of empty seats at the dinner table or the sound of silence that filled my house after 6 p.m. My colleague David stopped by the hallway around 8:45. He's the other biology professor, younger than me by about 15 years, and he had that look on his face people always have when they're trying to be subtle about noticing you're falling apart. "You look tired, James," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Everything okay?" I told him I was fine. I always told people I was fine. It was easier that way. Easier than explaining that my house felt too big, that cooking for one seemed pointless, that I'd started grading papers at midnight just to keep from going to bed in that empty house. David didn't push it. He never did. He just nodded and headed off to his own classroom, probably relieved that he didn't have to have a real conversation. The day passed in its familiar rhythm. I taught about cardiac cycles and arrhythmias, showed students how stress affects heart rate, demonstrated blood pressure measurements on a volunteer. I did it all well, I know I did. The evaluations from students were always strong, but there was no spark in it anymore. It was habit, muscle memory, a man going through the motions of a life that once had meaning. Around noon, I had a brief lunch alone in my office. By evening, I was home. My house sits in a quiet neighborhood on the north side of Chicago. It's a nice place, 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, hardwood floors that Margaret had picked out. We'd bought it together when Tyler was just 5 years old. Now it felt like a museum dedicated to a life I'd already lived, full of memories in every corner and ghosts in every room. I poured myself a glass of wine, a Cabernet Margaret used to like, and settled into the chair by the window. Outside, people were walking dogs, coming home from work, living the kind of normal evening lives that suddenly felt impossible to me. I watched the city breathe around me while I sat still inside this house, this beautiful, suffocating house. That's when my phone rang. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Tyler, my son. I hadn't heard from him in nearly 2 weeks, which wasn't unusual. He was busy in New York with his medical career, building his life in that fast-paced world I'd never quite understood. We talked sometimes, checked in, but there was always this distance between us now. It had grown wider since Margaret died, as if losing her had somehow untethered him from Chicago from me. I answered. "Hey, Dad." His voice came through clear and controlled the way it always was. "How's everything?" "Good, Tyler, good. How are you?" "I'm fine. Listen, I'm calling because I've made a decision." He paused, and I could hear the city noise behind him, horns, voices, the hum of New York. "I'm coming back to Chicago. I'm moving back." I felt something shift in my chest. Relief, hope, I wasn't sure anymore. "Really, that's great, Tyler." "When?" "Next week." "Dad, I'm taking some time off from the practice. I want to be closer to home. To you." He paused again, longer this time. "There's something important I need to talk to you about in person. Something I've been thinking about for a while." I set down my wine glass, suddenly aware of my heartbeat, in a way I usually kept buried under routine and distraction. "Of course," I said. "Tell me when you arrive and I'll pick you up from the airport." "I will. I'll see you soon, Dad. Take care of yourself." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room, the television playing to no one, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: anticipation. My son was coming home. The arrivals area at O'Hare Airport hummed with the controlled chaos of a Friday afternoon. Families reunited with excited embraces, business people rushed past, checking their phones, and travelers navigated the maze of luggage and terminals. I stood near the baggage claim, scanning the crowd when I spotted him. Tyler. He walked through the sliding doors with a black duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and for a moment I barely recognized him. When had my son become so polished? So put together, he wore an expensive-looking blazer over a dark shirt. His hair perfectly styled, his face set with an expression of absolute focus. This wasn't the boy who'd left Chicago 3 years ago. This was someone else, someone harder. But when his eyes found mine, his face transformed. The stern expression melted into a smile, and suddenly he was my son again, the one who'd needed help with homework, who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd once believed his father could fix anything. "Dad!" He moved toward me quickly, pulling me into an embrace that felt almost too tight, as if he was holding on to something. "God, it's good to see you." I held him, feeling the solidity of him, the realness of having my child in my arms again. "Tyler, I'm so glad you're here. How was the flight?" "Fine, fine, smooth." He pulled back, keeping his hands on my shoulders as if assessing me. "You look good, Dad. Healthy." There was something in the way he said it, too deliberate, too measured, but I pushed the thought away. He'd been gone, and now he was back. That was what mattered. As we walked toward the parking garage, Tyler talked about New York. But the words felt rehearsed, like he was giving me a performance rather than sharing real experiences. He talked about late nights at the hospital, about the competitive environment, about how demanding the medical world was. His tone was light, but his jaw was tight, and his hands kept clenching and unclenching. "And how long are you staying?" I asked as we reached my car. "A few weeks at least. I needed a break from the intensity. I wanted to come home." He paused, looking out the window as we pulled out of the garage. "I wanted to be close to you. I realized I haven't really been present in your life, and that's something I regret." The words sounded sincere, but something about them felt off. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. This was Tyler trying to make amends, trying to rebuild our relationship after the distance of the past few years. Wasn't that what I'd wanted? When we arrived at the university campus, where I'd arranged to meet Kevin Anderson for a quick coffee before heading home, Tyler came with me. Kevin is my oldest friend from the faculty. We'd worked together for nearly 25 years, and he'd known Margaret well. He'd been one of the few people who'd truly understood my grief. Kevin was already at the coffee shop when we walked in, and his face lit up when he saw Tyler. They shook hands, warmly exchanged pleasantries about New York and the medical field. But I noticed something. Kevin's eyes kept shifting between me and Tyler, watching, calculating. His usual easy smile seemed strained, and when Tyler excused himself to use the restroom, Kevin leaned toward me. "Everything okay with Tyler?" he asked quietly. "Why do you ask?" I felt defensive, though I wasn't sure why. "I don't know. Something about him seems different. Off." Kevin stirred his coffee slowly. "Maybe I'm just being protective of you, but just be careful, James. That's all I'm saying." I dismissed it at the time. Kevin was always protective, always reading too much into things. But his words planted a small seed of unease that I couldn't quite shake. When Tyler returned, he seemed to sense the shift in the room. His smile became brighter, more insistent, and he steered the conversation toward lighter topics. After we finished our coffees, Tyler suggested we head home so he could rest from the flight. It wasn't until we were back at my house, and Tyler had settled his things in the guest room, that he found me in the kitchen. "Dad, I brought you something," he said, holding a small velvet box in his hands. It was a deep red, almost burgundy, the kind of box you'd find jewelry in. His expression had shifted again. There was that focus, that intensity I'd seen at the airport. "What's this?" I took the box, feeling its weight in my palm. "A gift. Something I want you to wear." He opened the box himself, and inside, nestled in white silk, was a ring. Not a traditional ring, but a sleek metallic band with a small digital display. It looked expensive. It looked important. "It's called Vital Ring Pro Medical. It's the latest health monitoring technology. It tracks your heart rate, detects irregularities, sends alerts if something seems wrong." I stared at it. "Tyler, this must have cost..." "Don't worry about the cost, Dad. Your health matters to me. More than money ever could." His voice was warm, almost tender, but his eyes, those focused, calculating eyes, remained absolutely still. "I need you to promise me something. I need you to wear it all the time, even when you sleep. It needs to be in constant contact with your skin to work properly." "Of course," I said, slipping the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for me. "That's very thoughtful of Tyler. Thank you." He smiled, and in that smile, I thought I saw something flicker. But before I could identify what it was, the moment passed. "You're welcome, Dad. I'm just taking care of you. That's what sons do." The living room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the evening traffic outside. Tyler had dimmed the lights slightly, and the room had taken on that intimate quality that comes when day gives way to night. Everything feels smaller, more contained. I sat on the couch, the velvet box still resting in my hands, suddenly aware of how much weight something so small could carry. "Go ahead, Dad. Open it," Tyler said, settling into the chair across from me. He had that intense focus again, the same expression he'd worn at the airport. His fingers were steepled together, and he was watching me with an attention that felt almost clinical. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside, on a bed of white silk, was a ring unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was made of what looked like brushed silver, but with a subtle metallic sheen that caught the lamplight. The band was smooth and seamless, and near the inner curve there was a tiny digital display, so small I almost missed it at first. It was elegant in a way that felt almost alive, as if the metal itself had some kind of consciousness. "This is Vital Ring Pro Medical," Tyler explained, and his voice took on the tone of a doctor giving a patient important information. "It's one of the most advanced personal health monitoring systems on the market. The technology is really sophisticated, Dad. It uses advanced sensors to track your cardiovascular function in real time." I picked the ring up carefully, feeling its weight. It was heavier than I expected. "How much did this cost?" "Ha, don't worry about that," Tyler said quickly. "I got a good deal, but the retail price is around $1,800. But that's not important. What's important is that this device could save your life. $1,800. That was nearly 3 weeks of my university salary. It was an astronomical amount of money to spend on a piece of jewelry, even if it was supposed to monitor my health. I'd never owned anything so expensive in my life. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "I'm perfectly healthy, Tyler. The doctor said, 'You have arrhythmia, Dad.' Remember the irregular heartbeat they found during your physical last year?" His tone was patient, but there was an edge underneath it. "That's not something to take lightly. Arrhythmia can be unpredictable. It can get worse without warning. This ring monitors your heart rate patterns, detects irregularities, and if something abnormal is detected, it sends alerts directly to my phone." "Your phone?" "Yes. I've set up the app so that I can monitor your vital signs in real time. That way, if something happens, I'll know immediately. I'll be able to help you faster than you could help yourself." He leaned forward slightly. "But there's one important thing, Dad. You have to wear it all the time, every single moment. Even when you sleep. The sensors need constant skin contact to function properly. If you take it off, the system won't work, and I won't be able to protect you." The word "protect" hung in the air between us. It should have sounded reassuring. From my son's mouth, it should have felt like love. And maybe it was. Maybe this was exactly what it appeared to be, a concerned son trying to take care of an aging father. But something in my gut resisted. Something primal and old within me recognized a boundary being drawn, a line of control being established. I'd spent 60 years reading human physiology, understanding the body's signals. And right now, my body was sending signals I couldn't quite interpret. Still, I looked at my son's face, so earnest, so focused on my well-being, and I felt ashamed of my hesitation. Who was I to doubt his intentions? He'd come back to Chicago specifically to be closer to me. He'd bought me an expensive piece of technology to monitor my health. He was trying to save my life. Of course," I said, sliding the ring onto my ring finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for my hand. "Thank you, Tyler. This is incredibly thoughtful of you." "You're welcome, Dad." His expression softened slightly, and for a moment I saw genuine warmth there. "I love you. I want to make sure you're okay, that you're safe." "I know," I said. "I appreciate it more than you know." We sat in that quiet moment together, and I looked down at the ring on my finger. The tiny display showed my current heart rate 72 beats per minute. Perfectly normal. The ring felt strange against my skin, cool and slightly heavy, not uncomfortable exactly, but foreign. As if I'd put on a piece of clothing that didn't quite fit right, even though technically it did. Tyler smiled. "How does it feel?" "Fine," I said automatically. "It feels fine." But as the evening wore on, and I sat with that metal band around my finger, a small voice in my mind kept whispering something I couldn't quite articulate. It was the same voice that had made me hesitate when Kevin looked at me with suspicion at the coffee shop. The same voice that registered the subtle wrongness in Tyler's attention. I pushed it away, dismissed it as paranoia, as the natural skepticism of an aging man facing the reality that his body was no longer entirely his own. After all, wasn't this what it meant to be taken care of? Wasn't this how love looked in the modern world? Constant monitoring, constant awareness, constant connection. That night, I fell asleep with the ring still on my finger, its tiny screen casting a faint glow against my wrist in the darkness. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small alarm bell began to ring. The lecture hall was warm that afternoon, and I'd been standing in front of 35 biology students for nearly an hour discussing the complexities of electrical conduction in the heart. I'd done this same lecture dozens of times before it was material I knew like the back of my hand. But somewhere in the middle of explaining the role of potassium ions in cardiac rhythm, something shifted inside my chest. It started as a tightness, a subtle pressure I could almost ignore. I continued talking, pointing to the diagram on the screen behind me, but the sensation intensified. My breath became shorter, shallower. I felt the first beads of perspiration forming on my forehead. I paused mid-sentence, gripping the edge of the podium. "Are you okay, Professor?" one of the students asked a girl named Sarah from the third row. "Yes, fine," I said automatically, though my voice sounded thin even to my own ears. I need a moment." The dizziness came next, a spinning sensation that made the room tilt slightly. I closed my eyes, willing it to pass. My heart was racing now, hammering against my ribs in a rhythm that felt decidedly wrong. Not the steady, predictable beat I'd taught students to recognize, but something erratic, almost frantic. I could feel it in my throat, in my wrists, pounding like a trapped bird inside my own body. I looked down at the vital ring on my finger. The display showed my heart rate 118 beats per minute. Elevated, but not dangerously so. Or was it I couldn't remember what was normal anymore? "I think we should take a break," I announced to the class, trying to keep my tone steady. "Read through Chapter 9 for next time." The students exchanged uncertain glances as I gathered my notes with trembling hands. I made it out of the lecture hall and to my office, where I sat heavily in my chair, focusing on breathing. In through my nose, out through my mouth. A technique I'd recommended to countless students over the years, breath work to manage anxiety. But this didn't feel like anxiety. This felt like something was genuinely wrong with my body. The symptoms faded after about 20 minutes, leaving me exhausted and unsettled. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, teaching my remaining 2 classes on autopilot, my mind half absent, as I discussed mitochondrial function and cellular respiration. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I began to drift off, I'd jolt awake with that same sensation, the tightness in my chest, the racing heart, the feeling that my body was betraying me. At one point, around 3 a.m., I got out of bed and paced the hallway, convinced that if I stayed still, something catastrophic would happen. By morning, I was exhausted, but determined to push through. I made coffee, showered, and tried to pretend that everything was normal. It wasn't. Michael Foster, the department chair, caught me in the hallway around 10 a.m. He's a man in his late 50s, always impeccably dressed, always professional. But his expression showed genuine concern. "James, you look terrible," he said bluntly. "Are you sick?" "Just tired," I replied. "Didn't sleep well." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. Later that afternoon, Emily Rodriguez, one of our administrative assistants, stopped by my office with a concerned expression. Emily is in her mid-40s, warm and observant, the kind of person who notices when someone isn't themselves. "Professor Mitchell, can I get you anything?" "Some water tea?" she asked gently. "You seem a bit pale." "I'm fine, Emily. Thank you for asking." But I wasn't fine. Over the next few days, the episodes continued. The shortness of breath would strike without warning, sometimes during class, sometimes at home, once while I was at the grocery store and had to sit down on a bench in the produce section, pretending to tie my shoe while my heart raced. I told myself it was stress. The semester was demanding, and I was carrying the weight of my grief like an anchor around my neck. I was 60 years old, and my body was simply reminding me of that fact. These were the consequences of aging a body that no longer cooperated a mind, that tired more easily a heart that couldn't quite keep up anymore. That Friday evening I called Tyler. "Hey, Dad," he answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, controlled. "How are things?" "I've been having some symptoms," I said carefully. "Shortness of breath, heart palpitations, dizziness. It started a few days ago." There was a pause. I could almost hear him thinking on the other end of the line. "How often?" he asked. "Several times a day. They pass after a while, but it's stress, Dad." He interrupted, his tone reassuring in a way that somehow felt dismissive. "You're carrying too much tension. Your body is responding to emotional strain. The ring will help manage this. It's collecting data on your heart patterns, and over time the algorithms will help regulate your rhythm." "Tyler, I'm not sure the ring is—" "Trust me, Dad. I know what I'm doing. Just keep wearing it, and the symptoms will improve. Your nervous system needs to adjust. This is completely normal." After we hung up, I sat in the dark of my living room, one hand pressed against my chest, feeling my heart's irregular dance beneath my palm. The ring on my finger seemed to pulse with a faint electronic glow. The symptoms didn't improve. If anything, they were getting worse. The calls came like clockwork. Every morning without fail, my phone would buzz between 7 and 7:30 a.m. The caller ID always showed the same name, Tyler, and the first words out of his mouth were always the same. "The ring's still on your wrist, Dad." It became a ritual I wasn't sure when I'd agreed to. 2 weeks had passed since I'd put on the Vital Ring Pro Medical, and somewhere in those 14 days, my life had begun to reorganize itself around my son's concerns. I'd stopped going to the university. Not because Tyler explicitly told me to, he was too smart for that, but because of how he said it. "You're putting stress on your system, Dad. Maybe you should take a leave of absence, just for a few weeks, until the readings stabilize." His voice was full of concern, but it carried the weight of inevitability, as if taking time off wasn't a suggestion, but a diagnosis. So I stopped going. I'd also started following his dietary recommendations. Tyler had read about certain foods that could help regulate arrhythmia, he said. He emailed me lists of what to eat and what to avoid. No caffeine, no salt, specific vitamins at specific times. He'd even set phone reminders on my phone so I wouldn't forget to take them. I'd wake up to find 3 new notifications: 8 a.m., magnesium supplement; 12 p.m., omega-3 pill; 6 p.m., potassium supplement. I followed every instruction. What was strange was that I didn't question it. Or rather, I questioned it, but not enough to resist. Tyler was a doctor after all. He knew about the body in ways I never would despite my decades of teaching biology. There was comfort in surrendering to his expertise in letting someone else carry the weight of my health. After 3 years of managing my grief alone, of making decisions alone, of being alone, this felt like being cared for. The monitoring through the app was something I became aware of more gradually. Tyler would mention things I hadn't told him. "Your heart rate spiked yesterday at around 3 in the afternoon, Dad. What were you doing?" Or, "I noticed you were active for about 40 minutes this morning. How are you feeling?" Each comment was framed as concern, but they created a sensation of being watched. Not menacingly, that would have been easier to identify, but constantly, tenderly, lovingly, like being under a microscope that was also a blanket. Then came the day I mentioned wanting to have coffee with Kevin. "I don't think that's a good idea right now," Tyler said, when I told him during our morning call. His tone was gentle but firm. "Kevin is going to stress you out. He's always been intense, and you need calm right now. The app shows that your stress levels spike whenever you spend time with him." The ring can measure stress, I asked, surprised. It measures everything, Dad. Heart rate variability is one of the strongest indicators of stress. And honestly, I'm concerned about Kevin's influence on you. He's been putting ideas in your head that aren't helpful. What ideas? There was a pause. Never mind. Just trust me. For now, maybe keep your distance from him. Focus on recovery. I didn't call Kevin that day, but Kevin called me. James, I'm worried about you, he said without preamble. We'd known each other too long for small talk. You look like you're disappearing. Tyler is controlling everything what you eat, whether you go to work, who you see. This isn't love. This is manipulation. You're overreacting, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. He's just concerned about my health. No, Kevin said firmly. There's a difference between concern and control, and what Tyler is doing, that's control. James, please listen to me. This is a pattern I've seen before. It starts with health concerns, then it becomes about isolation, then before you know it, he's making your decisions for you. I wanted to argue with him, but something in what he said resonated with the small voice that had been growing quieter in my head over the past 2 weeks. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but Tyler is my son. He loves me. Love and control can look the same, Kevin replied. That's why it's so dangerous. After we hung up, I sat in my living room with the phone in my lap. Outside my window, the city moved on without me. People walked by on the sidewalk heading to work, to meetings, to lives that felt increasingly distant from my own. When had I stopped leaving this house? When had the boundaries of my world begun to shrink? That evening, I texted Tyler. I'd like to go out this weekend, maybe meet some friends for dinner. His response came within minutes. I don't think that's wise right now, Dad. Your heart needs stability. New environments can trigger episodes. Let's wait another week or two until the ring has more baseline data. Another week or two. I looked down at the silver band on my finger. The tiny display glowed softly in the dimming light. My heart rate was 74 beats per minute, completely normal. Healthy. Fine. But I'd never felt more trapped in my entire life. That morning, I woke with a clarity that felt almost dangerous. For the past 2 weeks, I'd been obedient. I'd followed every instruction Tyler had given me, taken every supplement at the appointed hour, avoided every friend who might upset my carefully monitored equilibrium. But somewhere in the darkness of the previous night, as I lay awake listening to my own heartbeat, irregular, uncertain, I'd made a decision. I was going to take the ring off. It wasn't a rational decision, not exactly. It was more like an impulse, a desperate grasp at something I couldn't name. But as I sat on the edge of my bed in the pale morning light, I knew that I needed to know. I needed to understand whether the ring was truly helping me or if it was doing something else entirely. My hands were trembling as I reached for the band of silver on my ring finger. It wouldn't budge. I tried again, pulling gently then with more force. The ring seemed to have tightened, somehow fitting so snugly against my skin that I couldn't find any give. Panic began to rise in my chest. What if it was permanent? What if Tyler had somehow designed it to be impossible to remove? But then with a combination of soap and persistence, I managed to work it free. The moment it slipped off my finger, I felt something shift inside my body, not painfully, but distinctly. It was as if a pressure I'd stopped noticing had suddenly released. I took a breath, a real breath, deep and unobstructed. My chest didn't tighten. My heart didn't race. The dizziness that had become my constant companion simply wasn't there anymore. I sat very still, breathing slowly, trying to understand what I was experiencing. The shortness of breath that had plagued me for the past 3 weeks, it was gone. The palpitations that had interrupted my sleep, that had made me question every physical sensation, they'd vanished the moment the metal left my skin. what was happening to me. I set the ring on the nightstand and didn't put it back on. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself. I showered without panic. I made coffee without my hands shaking. I sat in my study with a book and my heart remained steady. Hours passed and nothing terrible happened. No cardiac emergency, no collapse. Nothing. Around midday, my phone rang. The caller ID read Tyler. I answered, steeling myself. "Hello. Where are you?" His voice was different, colder, flatter, stripped of the warmth that usually colored our conversations. "I'm at home," I said carefully. "Why?" "The ring isn't transmitting data, Dad." My stomach dropped. I took it off." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, could sense the shift in his energy even through the phone. "You took it off?" His voice was quiet, but there was something dangerous underneath it. Something I'd never heard before. "Why would you do that?" I just needed to. "I wanted to see if... Do you understand what you're doing?" He interrupted. His tone became almost educational, the way a doctor might explain a fatal diagnosis to a patient. "That ring is the only thing keeping your system regulated. Your heart is unstable, Dad. Without it, you're at risk of catastrophic failure. You could have a massive cardiac event. You could..." He paused, letting the implication hang. "You could hurt yourself." The words "hurt yourself" carried weight, intent. A suggestion that my removal of the ring wasn't an act of curiosity, but of self-destruction. "Tyler, when I took it off, my symptoms got better. I could breathe. Shindia, that's not possible," he said firmly. "That's your anxiety talking. You're panicking because you know you're not supposed to remove it. Your body is responding to psychological stress, not to the absence of the ring. Dad, you need to put it back on. Right now." "Oh, but..." "Right now, Dad." His voice was hard now, unyielding. "If you don't put that ring back on in the next 10 minutes, I'm coming to get you. And we're going to the hospital. Because if you're refusing medical care, we need to have you evaluated." Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood. I understood perfectly. He was threatening to have me committed if I didn't comply. My hands were shaking as I reached for the ring on the nightstand. The metal was cool against my fingers as I slid it back onto my ring finger. The display glowed to life, showing my heart rate 98 beats per minute. Elevated. Stressed. "I put it back on," I said quietly. "Good," Tyler replied, his voice softening immediately. Back to the caring son. "That's the right choice, Dad. I know this is hard, but you need to trust me. I'm trying to keep you alive." After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my study, with the ring back on my finger, feeling more imprisoned than I ever had before. Because now I knew. I knew that the moment I removed it, Tyler would know. He was tracking me, not just monitoring my heart rate, but my location. And that knowledge was more suffocating than any physical restraint could ever be. That afternoon, I went to a coffee shop, with the ring on, of course. I needed to be around people, needed to feel less alone. Kevin was already there, waiting by the window. He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "James," he said, reaching out to grip my shoulder. "You look terrible." I tried to smile, but I could feel it falling apart before it even formed. Kevin's eyes dropped to the ring on my finger, and his expression shifted into something darker. He leaned closer, his voice low and urgent. "There's something very wrong here," he said quietly. "James, that ring's something about this whole situation isn't right. You need help, real help, professional help." I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to confess the tracking, the threats, the suffocating control that had wrapped around me like vines. But I couldn't. Because Tyler was watching. Tyler was always watching now. "I'm fine." I whispered the words hollow even as I spoke them, but Kevin didn't believe me, and neither did I. I didn't know about the meeting between Tyler and Michael until much later. By then it was already too late. What I learned was that Tyler had requested a private conversation with Michael Foster, my department chair. I wasn't there, of course. I only pieced it together afterward, from the way Michael's demeanor shifted toward me, from the careful sympathy in his eyes whenever he saw me in the hallway. "James, I wanted to talk to you about taking some extended time off," Michael said when he finally approached me in my office. He sat across from me, and I could see the concern was genuine even if the premise was manufactured. "Your health. Tyler mentioned you've been dealing with some serious arrhythmia complications. He's concerned that the stress of teaching is exacerbating your condition." I hadn't told Michael anything about my health. Tyler had done it for me. "I'm fine," I said, though the words felt automatic. "I can manage my workload." I'm sure you can," Michael replied carefully. "But Tyler was very clear that you need rest. He recommended a medical leave of absence. He said you're at risk of a serious cardiac event if you continue under this kind of strain." Michael meant well. I could see that. But what he'd done, what Tyler had engineered him to do, was another tightening of the noose around my neck. By the end of that week, word had somehow spread through my circle of friends that I was dealing with a serious health crisis. Calls from Kevin, from other colleagues, from people I'd known for years, they all dried up. I'd later realized that Tyler had likely suggested to these people through carefully worded messages or conversations that I needed peace and quiet, that my condition required isolation. The loneliness was suffocating. My phone stopped ringing with the casual invitations I'd once received. No more suggestions for weekend coffee. No more dinners or theater nights. The world had been carefully curated to exclude me, and I was left with only Tyler and the ring. Then Jennifer Scott found me. I was sitting alone in the faculty lounge one afternoon, picking at a sandwich I'd made without appetite when she walked in. Jennifer is an attorney who works in the university's legal department. She's in her 50s, sharp and observant, with an intensity that comes from spending her career reading between the lines. "Professor Mitchell," she said, sitting down across from me, "I heard you've been dealing with some health issues. News travels fast." I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. She didn't smile back. Her gaze dropped to my right hand, to the silver ring on my finger. She stared at it for a long moment. "Well, that's an interesting piece," she said slowly. "Where did you get it?" The question was innocent enough, but something in her tone, the careful precision of it, made my heart rate spike. I looked down at the ring, and for the first time in weeks, I really looked at it. Not as a medical device, not as a gift from my son, but as an object. Something that had orchestrated my entire existence into a cage. "My son gave it to me," I said. "It's a health monitoring device." "Your son Tyler?" Jennifer asked. "The doctor from New York." "How did you—" "No, I know him," she said simply. "Or rather, I know of him. We went to medical school together briefly. He was always, ambitious. Very focused on control, if I remember correctly. Had some interesting opinions about patient autonomy." Her words landed in my stomach like stones. "He's trying to help me," I said, but the words felt hollow now. They always did when I said them aloud to someone else. "James," Jennifer said quietly, leaning forward. "I don't want to overstep, but I've seen situations like this before. In my legal work. When someone isolates another person, monitors them, constantly controls their access to the outside world under the guise of care." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "That's not love. That's abuse." The word hung in the air between us, abuse. I'd never allowed myself to think of it that way. Tyler was my son. He loved me. He was trying to keep me healthy. But as Jennifer spoke, I felt something crack open inside me, a space where the truth had been trying to emerge all along. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "For now, just think about it," Jennifer said. "And if you ever need help, real help, you know where to find me." That evening, my phone rang. "Tyler." "Dad, I heard you had lunch with Jennifer Scott today," he said. His voice was calm, but there was an undertone I recognized now. The undertone of surveillance. My blood ran cold. "How did you know that—" "I have my ways," Tyler replied, and there was something almost playful in his tone. "Jennifer's interesting, isn't she? Did she say anything about me?" I didn't answer. His voice hardened slightly. "What did she say?" "Nothing important." I lied, and I was ashamed at how easily the lie came. "Good," Tyler said. "Because Jennifer doesn't understand what we're doing here. She doesn't understand that you need protection. From stress, from people who would drain your energy, from yourself." He paused. "I need you to stay away from her, Dad. For your health." After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, with the ring pulsing softly on my finger, and I understood with terrible clarity that I was completely and utterly trapped. Tyler was watching everything, everyone, and I had nowhere left to run. The afternoon sun was warm on my face as I sat on the stone bench near the fountain in Grant Park. I'd come here to escape, to find some quiet space away from the house, away from the ring on my finger that had become both a lifeline and a prison. The city sprawled around me, people walking dogs, couples sitting close together, joggers passing by. And yet I felt utterly alone. My heart was racing again. It had been racing all morning, ever since I'd woken up with that familiar tightness in my chest. The shortness of breath, the dizziness, the sensation that my body was betraying me in ways I couldn't control or understand. I closed my eyes and tried to regulate my breathing. In through my nose, out through my mouth. The technique that was supposed to help, but it wasn't helping. The world began to tilt slightly. I gripped the edge of the bench, trying to hold on, trying to keep myself anchored to reality. Around me, people continued their normal lives, unaware that something inside me was falling apart. My vision started to blur at the edges. My hands felt cold despite the warmth of the sun. I thought I heard someone calling out, but the voice sounded distant, as if it were coming from underwater. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure how much time had passed. Seconds, minutes. There was a woman leaning over me, her face creased with concern. She was in her early 60s, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical style, and her eyes, intelligent, assessing, were studying me with the focused attention of someone trained in medicine. "Easy," she said, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. "Don't try to move too quickly. You fainted." My voice came out hoarse. "What happened?" "You collapsed," the woman said. She was helping me sit up now, supporting me against the bench. "I was walking past and saw you go down. I'm a doctor, so I stayed with you until you came to. You've been unconscious for about 3 minutes." I looked at her more carefully. There was something reassuring about her presence, though we'd never met before. "And I'm Susan," she said. "Susan Cooper. I'm a retired cardiologist." I managed. "James Mitchell." "Well, James, I need to know what's going on with you," Susan said, with the kind of professional directness that comes from decades in medicine. "Have you been having episodes like this?" I didn't know where to start, how to explain the past weeks without sounding insane. But there was something about Susan's presence, about the competence and care in her voice, that made me want to tell her everything. "I've been having heart palpitation," I said slowly. "Shortness of breath, dizziness, for about 3 weeks now." Susan's expression shifted. She was no longer just a kind stranger, but a doctor assessing a patient. Her eyes dropped to my hands, and then to the ring on my finger. "How long have you been wearing that?" she asked, gesturing to the Vital Ring Pro Medical. About 3 weeks, I said. My son gave it to me. He's a doctor. He said it would help monitor my heart. Susan's hand reached out, and she gently took my wrist, turning it to examine the ring more closely. I could see the exact moment her expression shifted. Not recognition of someone she knew, but recognition of something wrong. James, she said carefully, her voice taking on a professional tone. I've spent 40 years in cardiology. I've seen every cardiac monitoring device on the market. I've never seen this before. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? I asked. I mean that this ring shouldn't be causing the symptoms you're describing, Susan said. She was still holding my wrist, her fingers gentle but assessing. But I also mean that I'm concerned about what this device actually is, the way it sits on your skin, the way it seems to conform to your finger. The electromagnetic signature I can almost feel from it. Electromagnetic signature. The words didn't make sense. James listened to me very carefully, Susan said, and her voice had shifted to something more urgent. I need you to tell me everything about this ring, where it came from, what your son told you about it. Everything. So I told her. I told her about Tyler coming back to Chicago, about the gift, about the promise that it would keep me safe, about the app that let him monitor my vital signs, about the way my health seemed to deteriorate the moment I put it on. As I spoke, Susan's expression grew darker. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her professional composure cracking slightly to reveal genuine concern underneath. Your son told you this was a legitimate medical device, she finally asked. Yes. He said it was the most advanced cardiac monitoring system on the market. James. I don't believe that's true, Susan said quietly. I don't think this is a medical device at all. Or if it is, it's not what he told you it was. She looked down at the ring again. I think this device might actually be causing your symptoms. The electromagnetic radiation it's emitting could absolutely trigger the kind of arrhythmia and palpitations you're experiencing, especially if you have any underlying cardiac vulnerability. But Tyler said, I don't care what Tyler said. Susan interrupted, not unkindly. James, I don't know your son, but I know what I'm seeing here. And what I'm seeing doesn't add up. A legitimate cardiac device wouldn't produce this kind of electromagnetic signature. A real doctor wouldn't give this to his father without proper vetting through official channels. I looked down at the ring, at the small digital display showing my heart rate elevated, of course, always elevated lately. What are you saying? I asked, though I think I already knew the answer. I'm saying that ring might not be helping you, Susan said gently. I'm saying it might be hurting you. And I'm saying that if you trust me, if you trust a stranger who happens to be a cardiologist and who happens to care about your well-being, I think we need to figure out exactly what that device is and what it's doing to your body. She paused, and in that pause I understood that I was being offered a choice, a real choice, between the comfortable lie I'd been living and a potentially devastating truth. Will you let me help you? Susan asked. I looked at this woman who'd appeared in my life at exactly the moment I needed her most. A stranger, yet somehow exactly the kind of person I needed to trust. I thought about everything Tyler had done, every layer of control he'd wrapped around me, and I said yes. If you're still watching, please leave a comment, I'm here below, so I know you haven't left. And answer me honestly. If your child gave you something supposedly to protect you, would you be suspicious, or would you wear it without hesitation? An important note before we continue: the following includes fictional elements created for storytelling and educational purposes. If you want to stop now, that's perfectly fine. We sat on a bench in Grant Park near the lakefront. Susan held the ring in her hands, examining it with the focused intensity of a medical expert encountering something completely outside her experience. "This is very sophisticated," she murmured. I watched her work, anxiety building with each passing minute. The ring caught the afternoon light that brushed silver, gleaming innocently. But I knew it wasn't innocent. "It's not James." Susan said finally, "Prepare yourself. This isn't what we thought. It's worse." My stomach dropped. "Worse how?" "This ring isn't a medical device," Susan said slowly. "There's a GPS transmitter built into the band. I can see the circuitry here." She pointed to a barely visible metallic threading. "But there's more. Much more." She adjusted her angle, studying the ring like a specimen. "There's a microphone embedded near the display. And if I'm reading this correctly, there's camera technology. Miniaturized, but definitely present." The words didn't make sense. "A camera inside the ring." Inside the ring," Susan confirmed, her voice grim. "James, this device isn't monitoring your heart. It's monitoring everything, your location, your conversations, you." My phone rang. The caller ID read Tyler. Susan looked at me. "Don't answer it," she said quietly. But I was already reaching for the phone. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to know. "Hi, Tyler," I said. "Dad, where are you?" His tone was casual, but there was something underneath it. Something patient. Something terrifying. "I'm just out," I said, glancing at Susan. "You're at Grant Park," Tyler said. It wasn't a question. "You've been there since 2:45 p.m. Before that, you were at a cafe on Michigan Avenue from 1:30 to 2:40. Before that, you were at home from 11 a.m. My blood turned to ice. I started, but Tyler cut me off. "The ring, Dad. The ring tracks your location. GPS coordinates. Real time. I know exactly where you are right now." Susan was shaking her head, her face pale. She reached out and squeezed my hand. "Tyler, why would you—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Because you're mine to keep safe," Tyler said, and his voice had changed. The careful concern was gone, replaced by something possessive. "Because I need to know where you are at all times. That's what love looks like, Dad. Control." "That's not love," I whispered. "Isn't it?" Tyler laughed. "Dad, I know everything about your day. I know you talked to someone. I know you showed someone the ring. I know because I can hear everything you say." The microphone. He'd been listening all along. "There's also a camera, Dad," Tyler continued. "Just a small one, but it gives me a view of what's in front of you. I've been watching your face. I've been watching you realize the truth." I looked around the park, suddenly wondering if he could actually see me. Was there a camera pointed at me right now? "I don't understand," I said, though I understood perfectly. "It's very simple," Tyler said. "You belong to me, Dad. Your location, your conversations, your movements, they all belong to me. The ring is how I maintain that ownership. It's how I keep you mine." The word "mine" hung in the air like a curse. "You're controlling me," I said flatly. "I'm protecting you," Tyler corrected. "You're old, Dad. You're vulnerable. You need someone to look after you. That someone is me." Susan was pulling on my arm now, urgently gesturing toward the park exit. "Get away from here," her eyes were saying. "I'm calling the police," I said, standing up. "No, you're not," Tyler said with absolute certainty. "You're going to come home, and we're going to talk about why you tried to betray me." "I'm not telling you anything," I said. "Then we have a problem," Tyler said quietly. "Come home now, or I'm calling 911. I'll tell them you're experiencing a mental health crisis. I'll tell them you've been refusing medical care. I'm a doctor, Dad. Who do you think they'll believe?" The threat was clear. He would have me committed. He would take control. After he hung up, I stood frozen. My own son had turned me into a prisoner without walls. "And we need to move," Susan said, taking my arm. "We need to get to safety. Now." We walked quickly to her car. She drove us to a quiet cafe several blocks away. In a booth at the back, Susan pulled out her phone. Cuckoo. "We're contacting the authorities," she said firmly. "The ring is physical evidence. The surveillance is documented. They'll believe us." I nodded, barely able to speak. My son. My own son had made me his, to own his, to control his, to keep. "What if no one believes us?" I whispered. "What they will," Susan said, squeezing my hand. "Because I'm a doctor. Because the evidence is real. Because the truth is on our side." She pulled up the number for the police. My finger hovered over the call button. "After you call, you can't go home," Susan said gently. "Tyler will be waiting. He'll try to convince you this is all a misunderstanding. You need to be prepared for that." I thought about Tyler waiting at home, waiting to bring me back under control, and I pressed the call button. The front door was unlocked. I knew something was wrong the moment I turned the key and felt it give without resistance. My hands were shaking as I pushed the door open. The house was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that feels loaded with danger, the quiet before a storm. Tyler was sitting on the couch in the living room, legs crossed, completely at ease. He looked up when he heard me enter, and his expression was almost amused. "So you figured it out," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact. I stopped in the doorway, suddenly aware of how small the distance between us felt. How trapped I was. "Why are you here?" "Because this is my home too," Tyler said, standing up slowly. "And because we need to talk about what you've been planning." "I haven't been planning anything." "It's a liar," Tyler said simply. "You called the police from that cafe. You think I don't know the ring has GPS. Remember, I watched you drive there. I watched you sit in that car with that woman. I watched you call 911. My heart rate spiked. Of course he knew. He'd always known." "You want to know why I did this?" Tyler asked, gesturing to the ring still on my finger. "You want to know why I came back to Chicago? Why I spent all this time, all this energy building something to keep you safe?" "This isn't keeping me safe," I said. "This is controlling me." "Is there a difference?" Tyler asked, and he was smiling now, a real smile, not the careful expression he usually wore. "Think about it, Dad. You're 60 years old. You're alone. You're vulnerable. You needed someone to look after you. That someone is me. You're hurting me." "No," Tyler said firmly. "I'm protecting you. From yourself. From making mistakes. From the kind of chaos that comes with freedom." He took a step closer. "Do you know how many of my cases involve elderly people who made decisions without proper guidance, who lost everything, because they didn't have someone controlling things?" That's not what this is about," I said, backing away from him. "You said it yourself. You needed to control me because I said no to you." Tyler's expression shifted. For a moment I saw something raw underneath, something hurt and angry and desperate. "You cut me off," he said quietly. "You said no. You said I wasn't good enough for your money, your support, your approval. You chose to let me fail instead of helping me. You were asking me to fund something I didn't believe in," I said. "That's not abandonment, Tyler. That's parenting." "How is it?" Tyler's voice was cold now. "Or is it control? Isn't that what you're accusing me of? Using power to make someone do what you want?" The parallel landed like a punch. He wasn't wrong. There was a grain of truth buried in his manipulation, the complicated truth that sometimes love and control existed in the same space that boundaries could feel like rejection. But I pushed that thought away. Because as complicated as my refusal had been, what Tyler had done was something else entirely. This wasn't parenting. This was possession. "If you tell anyone about this," Tyler said, his voice dropping, "you're going to lose everything. Your reputation, your job, your freedom. Because I can make it happen, Dad. I'm a doctor. People will believe me when I say you're unstable, when I say you need psychiatric evaluation, when I say you're a danger to yourself. I'm not. And if that doesn't work, Tyler continued, I'll make sure everyone knows that you abandoned your son, that you refused to help him when he needed you, that you're selfish, that you're cruel. The threats came like weapons, each one designed to exploit a different vulnerability. My need to be seen as a good father, my fear of judgment, my terror of losing control of my own narrative. I'm calling the police, I said. Tyler laughed. It was a genuine laugh, almost joyful. Who are they going to believe, a bitter old man with heart problems, or a successful doctor who's worried about his father's mental decline? He shook his head. You have no evidence, Dad. Just a ring. Just a story. Just your word against mine. He took another step toward me, and something inside me broke free. I turned and ran. I didn't think about it. I didn't plan it. I just moved. Out of the living room, down the hallway, toward the door. Behind me, I heard Tyler laughing, amused rather than alarmed. He thought I would come back. He thought this was just a tantrum, but I didn't come back. I got in my car and drove without direction, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I finally stopped, I was parked on a dark street blocks away from home. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and called Susan. James. She answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting. Are you okay? I need help, I said, my voice breaking. I need to get away from him. I need to. I couldn't finish the sentence. Listen to me, Susan said, her voice steady and calm. You're safe now. You got out. That's what matters. Where are you? I don't know, I admitted. Somewhere near home, but I can't go back. He was there. He was waiting. He knew about the police call. He knows everything. Okay, Susan said. Come to my hotel. I'm staying at the Hyatt downtown. Room 1247. Drive there now. Don't stop. Don't go home. Just come straight here. What do we do? I asked. We go to the police in person, Susan said. We show them the ring. We tell them everything. And we make sure you're protected. James, you're not alone. Not anymore. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my car and let myself shake. I'd broken free. It wasn't the end, but it was a beginning. Finally, I was taking my life back. The hotel room felt sterile and safe in a way I hadn't experienced in weeks. Susan had left me alone for a few minutes to use the bathroom, and I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone trembling in my hand. I knew what I had to do. Everything depended on this moment. I pressed 911. 911, what's your emergency? A calm, professional voice answered immediately. I'm being tracked, I said, and the words came out in a desperate rush. There's a device, a ring, that has GPS, a camera, and a microphone embedded inside it. It's transmitting my location in real time to an application. The person tracking me is my son. I'm in danger. I need help. I need protection right now. The dispatcher's tone shifted immediately to full alert. She took my information with careful precision, my location, my name, my situation. She assured me that officers would be dispatched immediately and instructed me to stay where I was and keep the door locked. 20 minutes later, there was an authoritative knock on the hotel room door. The police officers, one woman, one man, both in their 40s, entered with professional efficiency and purpose. Behind them came Jennifer Scott, still in her work clothes, from the legal department at the university. And then Kevin, who must have driven directly from wherever he'd been when Jennifer called him with the urgent news. James, Kevin said, pulling me into a quick but firm embrace. Thank God you're okay. We were so worried. Sir, I need to ask you some important questions, the female officer said. Her name was Officer Martinez. Her partner introduced himself as Officer Williams. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Start from the beginning. So I told them everything, all of it in painful detail. The ring, the symptoms that followed, the app that tracked my movements, the systematic control over my life, the confrontation with Tyler, his threats, my desperate escape from my own home. As I spoke, Officer Martinez took detailed notes while her partner, Officer Williams, carefully examined the ring under the bright hotel light, turning it over in his gloved hands. This is highly unusual, Officer Williams said, his voice tight with concern. I've never seen technology like this built into jewelry before. This is extremely sophisticated equipment. Jennifer leaned forward, her legal instincts fully engaged. James, I see that. She took the ring from Officer Williams and studied it with intense focus. This is surveillance equipment, advanced surveillance equipment. This is... She looked directly at the officers. This is multiple federal crimes, illegal electronic surveillance under federal wiretapping laws, elder abuse, harassment and intimidation, possibly fraud and criminal conspiracy. We'll need to send this to our forensic lab for complete analysis, Officer Martinez said. But first I want to understand more about your son's background. Does he work in technology? How would he have access to something like this? He's a doctor, I said. A cardiologist. But he mentioned being part of a larger organization. He suggested there were other victims like me. That's when I realized this wasn't just about control, it was about something much bigger. The officers exchanged a meaningful glance. Something shifted in the room, a collective recognition that this investigation was bigger than they'd initially thought. Susan emerged from the bathroom and introduced herself with calm authority. I'm Dr. Susan Cooper. I'm a retired cardiologist, and I can scientifically verify that the electromagnetic radiation from this device caused Professor Mitchell's cardiac symptoms. The electromagnetic signature is completely inconsistent with any legitimate medical device on the market. Officer Martinez made a detailed note. We'll need your full statement as well, Doctor. Your medical expertise could be crucial to this case. Of course, Susan said. She turned to me with reassurance. James, this is going to be okay. You did the right thing by calling for help. You were brave. Kevin stood near the window, silent but unmovably present. His presence itself was a powerful statement of loyalty and support. Within the hour, more officers arrived at the hotel room. They took detailed photographs of the ring from multiple angles. They recorded comprehensive statements from me, Susan, and Jennifer. They documented everything with the methodical precision of professionals who understood the serious gravity of what they were handling. Based on what we're seeing here, Jennifer said to the officers, her voice firm with legal certainty, this goes far beyond a simple family dispute. This is systematic surveillance and control. This could be part of a larger international scheme. We need federal involvement. Officer Martinez nodded with understanding. We're going to need to bring your son in for questioning immediately. Do you know where he is right now? Probably at home, I said. But he might be at his clinic. He works at... I gave them the address, my voice steadier now that help had finally arrived. We'll bring him in, Officer Williams said. And given the nature of these serious allegations, we'll likely need to contact the FBI directly. This kind of sophisticated technology, the international scope you've mentioned, it suggests something much bigger than one individual acting alone. My heart skipped a beat. The FBI international scope. Everything I'd feared and suspected suddenly had institutional weight and authority behind it. What happens to me now? I asked, needing to know what came next. We're going to place you in protective custody, Officer Martinez said. For your safety while we conduct the investigation, You'll be at a secure location until we've secured your son and assessed the full scope of the situation. Kevin put his hand firmly on my shoulder. You're not going through this alone, James. I'm here. Jennifer's here. Susan's here. We're all here for you. As I packed a small bag with Susan's careful help, Officer Martinez received an urgent call. She listened intently for a moment, then nodded with satisfaction. We've located your son at his clinic. Officers are en route to bring him in for questioning right now. Within the hour, I was being escorted to a police vehicle. As I got in, I saw Officer Martinez on her phone. I caught fragments of the serious conversation, sophisticated surveillance equipment, possible international connection, FBI liaison, the international connection, the larger organization. Tyler's inexplicable confidence that he couldn't be touched. It all suddenly made terrible crystalline sense. As the vehicle pulled away from the hotel, I looked back and saw Jennifer, Kevin, and Susan standing in the lobby window watching me go. Their faces were serious and determined. They weren't just my friends, they were my witnesses, my advocates, my evidence that I wasn't losing my mind, that I wasn't lying, that what had happened to me was absolutely real. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: institutional support, legal protection, scientific credibility backing up my truth. And somewhere in a police car of his own, Tyler was being brought in for questioning. The ring, the instrument of his control, was now evidence. The truth was finally being officially told. Susan had been right all along. The authorities did believe me. Because I had concrete evidence. I had credible witnesses. I had the truth. And that, I realized in that moment, was more powerful than Tyler's threats had ever been. The FBI field office was exactly what I expected: sterile, professional, filled with the kind of quiet efficiency that made everything feel official. I'd been there for 2 days, mostly in a conference room with my handler, Officer Martinez, who'd transitioned from the local police to the FBI task force. The lead investigator was Special Agent David Anderson, a man in his 50s with the kind of weathered expression that came from years of chasing complex crimes. He sat across from me with 2 other agents, Agent Martinez, no relation to Officer Martinez, and Agent Torres, and they'd asked me to go through everything again from the beginning. I know this is difficult, Special Agent Anderson said, not unkindly, but we need to reconstruct every detail: the timeline, the symptoms, the technology, your son's behavior patterns. So I went through it all again. The ring, the symptoms, the app, the control, the GPS tracking, the microphone, the camera. With each detail, I watched the agents take notes, their expressions growing darker, more serious. When I finished, Special Agent Anderson leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a moment. Then he exchanged a glance with Agent Torres and Professor Mitchell. He said finally, "What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear, but I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Not even close." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" "Your son, Tyler Mitchell, is part of a larger international operation," Special Agent Anderson said. "We've been tracking this organization for 18 months. They target isolated, vulnerable individuals, often elderly, often with assets or inheritance potential. They recruit young operatives, usually with financial motivation or leverage, and train them to conduct intensive surveillance and psychological manipulation operations." The words felt surreal. An organization, international, other victims. "How many?" I asked. "At least 23 confirmed cases," Agent Martinez said. "Possibly more. The ring that was given to you, we've found the same technology in cases spanning 6 different countries: China, Australia, Canada, the UK, and others. The ring was manufactured in a facility in Shenzhen, China," Agent Torres added. Its sophisticated technology, GPS encrypted audio recording hidden camera. The design itself is intended to evade detection. Most people wouldn't even realize it wasn't a legitimate medical device. I thought about how easily I'd believed Tyler's story, how reasonable it had seemed, how the technology seemed just plausible enough to not question. Your son was recruited by this organization 8 months ago, Special Agent Anderson continued. We have communications showing that he was offered payment for successfully isolating and monitoring a target. In this case, you. The organization specifically targeted him because of your financial situation and your family relationship. They paid him. I felt something shift inside me. All of Tyler's claims about caring for me, about love and protection, they'd been lies. He'd been paid to do this. It's approximately $50,000 up front, Agent Martinez said, with bonuses based on successful monitoring duration and target compliance. When you attempted to remove the ring, Tyler was instructed to escalate control measures. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. Your son is part of a much larger operation, Special Agent Anderson said. He's not a leader. He's a tool, an operative. The real criminals are the organization running this scheme from overseas. They're extracting money from the victims through false medical claims, fraudulent devices, and psychological manipulation. We estimate the total take at over $3 million globally. $3 million, 23 victims, an entire infrastructure of predation. We've dismantled the manufacturing facility in China, Agent Torres said. We've frozen the company's assets. We're working with international law enforcement to identify all the victims. But we couldn't have done any of this without you. Without the evidence you brought us. What happens to the other victims? I asked. They're being contacted, Agent Martinez said. They're being informed that they were targets of a coordinated criminal enterprise. They're being offered support services, medical, psychological, legal. Many of them thought they were just dealing with a difficult family member. They didn't realize they were part of a larger pattern. I thought about that, about all those people who'd been isolated and controlled, who'd believed the lies, who'd thought they were alone. And Tyler, I asked. Tyler is facing federal charges, Special Agent Anderson said. Wire fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, illegal surveillance. He's cooperating with us in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's providing information about the organization, about other operatives, about the structure of their operation. He's cooperating. The word felt strange in my mouth. Yes, he understands that he's expendable to the organization. He's trying to save himself by giving us information. You'll be the primary witness at trial. Your testimony will be crucial in establishing the pattern of behavior, the deliberate nature of the surveillance, the psychological manipulation. I nodded slowly. I hadn't thought of it that way, that my testimony could help convict not just Tyler, but the larger organization. That my experience could help other victims. There's something else you should know, Special Agent Anderson said. The organization has a name in international law enforcement circles. They're called the Sovereign Ring Operation. They've been active for at least 5 years. They've targeted victims across multiple continents. You're one of the lucky ones, Professor Mitchell. Lucky, the word felt bitter. You got out, Agent Torres said simply. You recognized something was wrong. You reached out for help. Most of their victims don't. Most of them continue living under control for months, sometimes years, before they escape or die. You survived. And now you're going to help us stop them. After the interview, I was escorted back to my safe house, a small apartment in a secure building monitored by federal agents. It wasn't home, but it was safe. And for the first time in months, safe felt like enough. That night, Special Agent Anderson called. We wanted you to know we've identified 2 of the other victims. They've already reached out to thank you. Your courage gave them the courage to come forward. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my temporary apartment. Somewhere out there, other people were realizing they hadn't been alone. They were learning that what happened to them was part of a larger crime, not a personal failure. And somewhere in a federal holding facility, Tyler was facing the consequences of his choices. The trial would come soon, the testimony, the confrontation. But for now, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not just relief, but purpose. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness, a survivor, a voice for the voiceless. Jennifer's office was on the 18th floor of a downtown law building, with views of Chicago stretching out beyond the windows. I sat across from her desk, my hands folded in my lap, trying to keep them from shaking. "James," Jennifer said, pulling out a thick folder labeled State of Illinois versus Tyler Mitchell. "We're 3 weeks away from trial. I want to make sure you're as prepared as possible. This is going to be intense, but you need to understand what's coming." "I understand," I said, though the word felt hollow. "Tyler is facing 4 major charges." Jennifer continued flipping through documents. Illegal electronic surveillance under federal wiretapping statutes. Elder abuse under state law, wire fraud, conspiracy. The prosecution is strong. We have the ring as physical evidence. We have app data showing real-time tracking. We have GPS logs, and we have audio recordings of Tyler admitting to the surveillance. I nodded. I'd heard this before, but hearing it again made it feel real. "You're going to be the primary witness," Jennifer said, looking directly at me. "The prosecution will call you first. You'll establish the timeline. You'll describe the symptoms, the control, the manipulation. You'll detail Tyler's threats. And then," she paused, "then the defense will get to you." "What will they do?" I asked, though I could guess. "They'll attack your credibility," Jennifer said bluntly. "They'll suggest you're confused. They'll emphasize your age. They'll highlight your cardiac condition. They'll suggest that your grief over your wife's death is affecting your perception. They'll try to paint you as an unreliable narrator." I felt something tighten in my chest. "But," Jennifer continued, "we have Dr. Susan Cooper. She's a retired cardiologist with 40 years of experience. She'll testify that the electromagnetic radiation from the ring caused your symptoms. She'll confirm that the device is not a legitimate medical instrument. She'll establish the scientific basis for your health issues." "And the app data?" I asked. "Agent Torres from the FBI will present the app data," Jennifer said. "He'll show the real-time GPS coordinates matching your location to the timestamps. He'll present the audio recordings, which include Tyler explicitly admitting to the camera, the microphone, the GPS tracking." She pulled out another file. "Kevin Anderson will testify about your friendship and his observations of Tyler's control. Emily Rodriguez will describe how she watched you decline physically and socially. Michael Foster will explain how Tyler manipulated him into suggesting you take a medical leave. All of these witnesses create a pattern that Tyler can't deny." "What about Tyler?" I asked. "What will he say?" "Tyler will likely claim he was trying to protect you," Jennifer said. "He'll argue that the surveillance was for your own good. He'll say he was afraid you'd hurt yourself. The defense will try to frame this as a son's misguided attempt at caregiving, not as a crime. But that's a lie." "Yes," Jennifer agreed. "But juries sometimes struggle with family violence cases. Sometimes they want to believe the best of people, especially when there's a family relationship involved. That's why we need to be very clear about the facts." Over the next week, I met with Jennifer multiple times. She walked me through the prosecution's questions, had me practice my testimony, taught me how to remain calm when the defense tried to provoke me. "Remember," she said during one session, "you're not trying to convince the jury that Tyler is evil. You're just telling the truth about what happened. The facts speak for themselves." On the Sunday before the trial, Kevin, Susan, Jennifer, and I met at a quiet restaurant near the courthouse. "How are you feeling?" Kevin asked, his hand reaching across the table to squeeze my shoulder. "Terrified," I admitted, "but also ready." Susan smiled gently. "You'll do fine, James. Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do." "The evidence is strong," Jennifer said. "The prosecution has built a solid case. Tyler cooperated with the FBI, which means his own statement confirms much of what you'll testify to. We have this." I looked at the three people who'd stood by me through this nightmare. Kevin, who'd tried to warn me from the beginning. Susan, who'd appeared exactly when I needed her most. Jennifer, who'd transformed my story into legal action. "Thank you," I said. "All of you. I couldn't have done this without you." "You don't have to thank us," Kevin said. "We're your friends. We're your advocates. That's what matters." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed in the safe house, soon to be unnecessary, and thought about Tyler. About the son I thought I knew. About the person he'd become, or perhaps had always been. I thought about the other victims. The 23 people whose lives had been disrupted by the same organization. The parents who'd been isolated. The savings that had been drained. The trust that had been shattered. And I thought about tomorrow. About walking into that courtroom. About sitting in the witness box. About telling the truth in front of a jury of 12 people who would decide Tyler's fate. As dawn broke over Chicago, I made a decision. I would walk into that courtroom and tell my story. I would look Tyler in the eye and refuse to be ashamed. I would speak for myself and for all the other victims. The trial was about to begin. The courtroom was fuller than I expected. The gallery was packed with journalists, curious observers, and what I assumed were other victims of the Sovereign Ring operation who'd come to witness this trial. Judge Sarah Williams sat at the bench, her expression neutral but attentive. The jury, 12 men and women from Chicago, ranging in age from early 20s to late 70s, sat in their box, their faces carefully neutral as they waited to hear my story. And Tyler sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller than I remembered him. Diminished. His defense attorney, a woman named Patricia Morrison, with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, sat beside him, her posture rigid with professional detachment. Tyler himself stared straight ahead, refusing to look at me. I wore the suit Jennifer had helped me pick out. Navy blue, conservative, respectable. The outfit of a man telling the truth. My hands were shaking slightly as I took my seat in the gallery, waiting for my turn. The bailiff called the court to order at 9 o'clock sharp. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and the trial of State of Illinois versus Tyler Mitchell officially began. The prosecutor assistant district attorney James Ricci stood first. He was a man in his 50s with the courtroom presence of someone who'd tried hundreds of cases. His opening statement was surgical precise. "Your Honor, members of the jury." Ricci said, his voice steady and commanding. "This case is about possession disguised as love. It's about a son who systematically surveilled, controlled, and manipulated his aging father for financial gain and psychological dominance. We will show you evidence of sophisticated surveillance technology. We will show you GPS data proving real-time location tracking. We will show you audio recordings where the defendant himself admits to every charge laid against him. The defense will try to tell you this was about caregiving, about a son's misguided attempt to protect his father. But the evidence tells a different story. The evidence tells a story of calculated, deliberate control." Judge Williams nodded. The jury was already leaning forward. Then came my name. "We call Professor James Mitchell to the stand." I stood on legs that felt uncertain. I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. My voice didn't waver, at least. Ricci began gently walking me through the basics. My age, my profession, my wife's death 3 years ago, the loneliness that followed. By establishing context, he was humanizing me. The jury was seeing not just a victim, but a person. Professor Mitchell, please tell the jury what happened when your son came back to Chicago. I told them. All of it. The reunion at the airport. Tyler's apparent concern. The gift. The beautiful silver ring in its velvet box. The promise of health monitoring. The requirement to wear it 24/7. The symptoms that began almost immediately. The shortness of breath, the dizziness, the heart palpitations. As I spoke, I avoided looking at Tyler. I focused on the jury. I made eye contact with different jurors, letting them see my sincerity, my pain, my determination to speak truth. When Ricci asked, "Did you ever feel like you were being controlled?" I paused. I took a breath. I looked directly at the jury and said, I felt like I was being owned. I heard someone in the gallery gasp. The defense attorney, Patricia Morrison, stood for cross-examination. Her strategy was predictable attack credibility, suggest confusion, paint me as an unreliable narrator. Professor Mitchell, you're 60 years old, correct? With a documented history of cardiac problems. Yes, I said. Diakutski stum. And you were grieving the loss of your wife, a woman you'd been married to for 35 years. Yes. Isn't it possible that your perception of your son's actions was colored by that grief, that you were vulnerable, perhaps even depressed, and therefore misinterpreted his concern for control? I took my time before answering. Jennifer had warned me about this. Don't rush. Don't get defensive. No, I said firmly. My son told me directly that the ring had GPS, a camera, and a microphone. He told me he was tracking my location in real time. He told me he was listening to my conversations. He even played back conversations he'd recorded. Those aren't interpretations. Those are facts. Those are crimes. Morrison pressed on, but I didn't waver. By the time she finished her cross-examination, the jury looked skeptical of her argument. One juror, a woman in her 50s, was actually shaking her head. Then came the other witnesses. Dr. Susan Cooper took the stand and explained the electromagnetic signature of the ring in terms the jury could understand. She testified that the radiation levels were dangerous and inconsistent with any legitimate medical device. She described the miniaturized camera, the microphone, the GPS transmitter, all hidden inside what appeared to be a simple piece of jewelry. Her expertise was undeniable. The jury listened intently, several of them taking notes. Kevin Anderson testified about watching my decline, about how Tyler systematically isolated me from my friends, about how he'd warned me that something was wrong and been dismissed. His testimony was simple and powerful. I watched my best friend disappear. The James I knew 6 months ago is not the same man. Tyler took that man from me. Emily Rodriguez described how she'd observed my transformation over the weeks. The vibrant, engaged professor had become withdrawn, frightened, isolated. She talked about the weight loss, the anxiety, the way I'd stopped coming to the faculty lounge for lunch. Michael Foster explained how Tyler had manipulated him into recommending a medical leave. He testified about how convincing Tyler had been, how clinical and professional his presentation had seemed. I believed he was a concerned son, Michael said. I didn't realize he was isolating his father. Throughout each testimony, the jury's expressions hardened. They were seeing the pattern. They were understanding the scope of what had been done to me, the isolation, the control, the systematic erosion of my autonomy. By afternoon, the prosecution presented the physical evidence. The ring itself was placed on a table in front of the jury. The prosecutor held it up. Let the light catch it. Let the jury see how innocent it looked. Then the FBI officers explained the GPS data pulling up maps on a large screen showing how Tyler had tracked my movements. Streets, buildings, times, and dates. A complete record of my location during every moment I wore the ring. Agent Torres played selected audio recordings. The courtroom went silent as my conversations played back. But more devastating were the recordings where Tyler spoke directly, where he admitted to the surveillance, where he claimed ownership of me. You belong to me, Dad. Your location, your conversations, your movements, they all belong to me. I watched the jury. Several of them closed their eyes at the sound of Tyler's voice. One older man in the front row of the jury box looked physically ill. The jury was no longer hearing an abstract description of crimes. They were hearing the actual voice of a son claiming possession of his father. The ring is how I maintain that ownership. Tyler's recorded voice continued. It's how I keep you safe. It's how I keep you mine. When the prosecution rested at the end of the day, the evidence was overwhelming. The jury had heard my testimony under oath. They'd heard supporting witnesses corroborate every detail. They'd seen the physical evidence, the ring itself, the GPS maps, the app data. Most importantly, they'd heard Tyler's own words admitting to everything. As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt something shift inside me. This was no longer my private nightmare. This was no longer something I had to carry alone. This was public. This was official. This was justice in motion. Outside the courthouse, reporters immediately swarmed us. Professor Mitchell, how do you feel after today's testimony? Did you ever suspect your son was capable of this? Are you confident in the prosecution's case? Kevin shielded me from the reporters while Susan guided me firmly to Jennifer's car. Jennifer met us at the curb, her expression confident and protective. That went very well, she said simply. The jury believed you. They believed all of it. I could see it in their faces. As we drove away from the courthouse, I looked back at the building. Somewhere inside, Tyler was being escorted back to custody. Somewhere inside, the jury was being sequestered, their minds full of evidence and audio recordings, and the haunting voice of a son claiming ownership of his father. Tomorrow will be closing arguments, Jennifer said from the front seat. Then the jury deliberates. But James, she glanced at me in the rearview mirror. You did it. You told your truth. That's all you could do. That's all anyone can do. And it was enough. For the first time in months, it felt like enough. The courtroom was quieter on day 2. The energy had shifted. Everyone understood that we were approaching the end, either justice or disappointment, victory or defeat. Judge Sarah Williams reconvened the court at 10 a.m. The jury filed back in their expressions serious. The evidence had been presented. Now came the arguments about what it all meant. Patricia Morrison stood for the defense's closing argument. She was clearly struggling. The evidence against Tyler was overwhelming, and there was only so much spin she could put on it. Your Honor, members of the jury. She began, her voice lacking the confidence it had possessed during the trial. What you've heard is a story twisted by a son's misguided attempt to protect his father. Yes, my client gave his father a device. Yes, my client was concerned about his father's health. But the interpretation of these actions as criminal is a stretch. My client loved his father. Everything he did was born from that love, however misguided it may have been. I felt Kevin's hand squeeze my shoulder from behind me. The argument was weak, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. Adi Arichi stood for rebuttal. He was precise, devastating. Your Honor, members of the jury, the defense asks you to believe that surveillance is love. That recording conversations without consent is protection. That tracking someone's location 24/7 is caregiving. But the evidence, the actual evidence, shows something very different. It shows systematic surveillance. It shows deliberate control. It shows a son who paid money to isolate his father. The defendant's own recorded words prove his intent. "You belong to me, Dad." Those aren't the words of a loving son. Those are the words of someone claiming ownership. This is not a case about love. This is a case about control dressed up as love. Judge Williams instructed the jury, explaining the charges, the legal definitions, the standard of proof. The jury was then sequestered in a deliberation room to consider their verdict. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, they returned. The foreman, an older man with kind eyes, stood when asked if they'd reached a verdict. "We have, Your Honor," he said. Judge Williams opened the verdict form and read it aloud. With each count, the same word, guilty. On the charge of illegal electronic surveillance under federal wiretapping statutes, guilty. On the charge of elder abuse, guilty. On the charge of wire fraud, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. 4 guilty verdicts. 4 convictions. The charges the FBI had brought. The charges the prosecution had proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I felt something inside me break open. Not in pain, but in release. All the fear, all the control, all the manipulation, it had a name now. It had been validated as crime. Tyler's actions weren't ambiguous or open to interpretation. They were crimes. Tyler sat perfectly still at the defendant's table. His face showed no emotion, but I saw his defense attorney lean over and whisper something to him. His hands clenched slightly. Judge Williams set a sentencing date for 3 weeks out. "Mr. Mitchell, you will be remanded to custody pending sentencing. Please stand." Tyler stood. The bailiffs approached him. As he was being led away from the courtroom, he finally looked at me. For just a second, our eyes met. I saw no remorse. I saw no understanding of what he'd done. I saw only a calculation how to minimize his sentence, how to survive what was coming. Then he was gone. The gallery erupted. Journalists rushed to their phones. Kevin pulled me into a tight embrace. Susan was crying not sad tears, but tears of relief and vindication. Jennifer squeezed my hand, her expression radiating quiet satisfaction. Outside the courthouse, the media was overwhelming. "Guilty on all counts," the headlines would read. Reporters pushed microphones toward me. "Professor Mitchell, how do you feel?" I looked at the cameras, at the journalists, at the city of Chicago stretching out behind them. "I feel," I said slowly, "like I can finally breathe." Within hours, FBI Special Agent Anderson held a press conference. The conviction of Tyler Mitchell is one outcome of a larger investigation into the international criminal enterprise known as the Sovereign Ring Operation, he announced. "We have identified 23 victims across 6 countries. We have dismantled the manufacturing facility in Shenzhen, China. We have frozen international assets. And we are actively pursuing the leadership of this organization." He paused, then continued. "Mr. Mitchell has agreed to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for a recommendation of leniency at sentencing. His cooperation will help us dismantle this organization entirely and protect future victims." That night, I sat with Kevin, Susan, and Jennifer in a quiet restaurant near the courthouse. We ordered wine, a luxury I hadn't allowed myself in months. "You did it," Jennifer said simply. "You survived. You got justice." "We did it," I corrected her. "All of us." I raised my glass to the people who'd believed me, who'd stood by me, who'd helped me transform from victim to survivor to advocate. "To truth," I said. "To freedom," Susan added. "To James," Kevin said. We clinked glasses as the city lights sparkled beyond the restaurant windows. Somewhere out there, 22 other victims were getting calls from the FBI. They were learning that they weren't alone. They were learning that what happened to them was part of a larger crime. They were learning that someone had finally held the perpetrators accountable. And somewhere, Tyler Mitchell sat in a holding cell, contemplating the consequences of his choices. As for me, I walked out of that courthouse into the Chicago night air, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months, truly, completely free. I walk into Kevin's home that Saturday evening, 2 weeks after the verdict, and for the first time in months, I feel genuine peace. The weight pressing down on my chest since Tyler placed that ring on my finger has finally lifted. Kevin greets me at the door with a warm embrace. Behind him, I hear laughter from the living room. Susan, Jennifer, and Emily are already there with drinks in hand. These gatherings have become a ritual moments with the people who stood beside me when everything fell apart. We settle around Kevin's dining table. The meal is simple: lasagna, fresh bread, salad, wine, but it feels like so much more than dinner. It's an acknowledgement that we've survived, that truth has prevailed, and that the darkness consuming my life for those long months has finally receded. As we eat, Jennifer begins to outline the investigation's scope. The FBI has identified 23 victims across 6 countries, she says, all targeted using the same technology, the same manipulation tactics. The manufacturing facility in China has been shut down, the distribution network dismantled. Operation Sovereign Ring has been effectively crippled. I absorb this, trying to comprehend the scale. 23 people, across continents, all suffering in isolation, believing surveillance was an expression of love. Susan leans forward, her physician's intensity meeting my eyes. If it weren't for you, if you hadn't had the courage to reach out to question what was happening, to fight back, there would be others still caught in this nightmare, still being controlled, still believing that surveillance and manipulation were signs of devotion. Now, I just want people to understand, I say, my voice steady, that love is never control. Real love doesn't track your every movement. Real love doesn't listen to private conversations. Real love sets you free. Jennifer nods her legal mind, recognizing the statement's power. She's been instrumental in helping the other victims file civil suits, in building awareness campaigns, in advocating for stronger legislation around electronic stalking and elder abuse. Emily, who experienced some isolation tactics Tyler employed, reaches across the table and squeezes my hand. You gave us all a voice, she says quietly. You showed us that it's okay to speak up, that we don't have to protect people who hurt us. Kevin raises his glass, and we follow suit. To James, he says, his voice thick with emotion, for his courage, for his strength, for refusing to let fear silence him. To James, they echo. The conversation shifts. Jennifer mentions that Tyler has agreed to cooperate with the FBI in exchange for consideration during sentencing. He's providing information about the network's leadership, about other operatives trained to exploit vulnerable family members. It's complicated, this cooperation from the person who caused me so much pain, but I understand the pragmatic necessity. How are you managing emotionally? Susan asks, and I appreciate her directness. Sastika, I'm in therapy, I tell her. Started 2 weeks ago. The therapist specializes in psychological trauma and elder abuse. Some days are harder than others. I have moments where I second-guess myself, wondering if I could have prevented all this. That's common, Susan says gently. But you need to understand that what happened wasn't your fault. Tyler was trained by professionals. He was manipulating you using sophisticated technology and psychological tactics. The shame belongs with him, not with you. You're going back to teach next semester, right? Kevin asks. Part-time. I confirm. I'm not ready for a full load yet, but I need to get back to what I love. Teaching grounds me. It reminds me who I am beyond this nightmare. As the evening winds down, we move to the living room. The conversation becomes more reflective, more personal. Susan talks about expanding her practice to include elder abuse screening. Jennifer discusses plans for a nonprofit helping victims of technology-enabled abuse. Emily speaks about returning to her career with renewed purpose. And me, I talk about the future in terms I haven't allowed myself to use in a long time. Not in terms of fear or loss, but in terms of possibility, of healing, of moving forward. One more thing, Kevin says as the evening draws to a close. He retrieves a bottle of wine he's been saving something special. I want to propose a toast, not to the trial, not to the verdict, not even to justice. I want to propose a toast to freedom and to truth, to the possibility of beginning again. We raise our glasses one final time. To freedom and truth. We say together, and I feel something shift deep within me. For months, I was imprisoned by a single piece of technology, by the manipulation of someone I loved, by the erosion of my autonomy. But tonight, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me, who have proven their loyalty through action and sacrifice, I realize I've crossed a threshold. I'm no longer the victim in this story. I'm a survivor. I drive home that night without fear. The roads are familiar. The darkness outside my window feels natural, not threatening. My apartment welcomes me like an old friend. As I lie in bed, I think not about what I've lost, but about what I'm about to gain, a second chance at life. A life lived on my own terms, guided by my own choices, surrounded by people who love me genuinely and freely. I'm beginning my life again, and this time I know exactly what real love looks like. 1 year after the verdict, I stand in front of my classroom at Chicago State University, and the weight I've carried for so long has transformed into something else, entirely purpose. The lecture hall is full. Over 100 students sit before me, their faces attentive, their notebooks open. But today isn't just another day in my academic calendar. Today, I'm introducing a new course I've designed, Technology, Autonomy, and Abuse Understanding Modern Manipulation. It's a course born from experience, from trauma, and from the hard-won knowledge that comes only from surviving something most people can't imagine. Abuse, I tell them, is fundamentally about control. It wears many faces. Sometimes it's loud and violent. Sometimes it's quiet and insidious. And sometimes in our modern age, it hides inside a piece of technology designed to look like care. I hold up a photograph of the vital ring. The actual device now sits behind protective glass in the Chicago Museum of Contemporary History, labeled simply Example of Technology-Enabled Elder Abuse 2024. It's surreal seeing something that caused me so much pain transformed into a historical artifact, a cautionary tale for future generations. The students listen intently. Many of them don't know my story yet, though some have heard fragments, rumors, news reports. By the end of the semester, they'll understand the full context. But that's not where my energy ends these days. Outside the classroom, I've been building something with Jennifer, Susan, Kevin, and Emily. We founded a nonprofit organization called Against Control for Freedom. Its mission is simple: to educate the public about technology-enabled abuse, to support survivors, and to advocate for stronger legal protections. Jennifer serves as our legal advisor, her expertise invaluable as we navigate the complex landscape of elder abuse legislation. Emily runs our support programs, connecting survivors with counselors, advocates, and each other. And Susan has become so much more than a rescuer or a medical professional. She's become my partner in this work, and if I'm being honest with myself, she's become my partner in life. We don't hide it, but we don't broadcast it either. What we have is real and grounded in mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine affection. There's no possession in it, no control, only choice, only freedom. It's the kind of love I once thought I understood but never truly experienced until now. Last month, I gave a public lecture at Northwestern University titled Love versus Control: Understanding Manipulation. The auditorium was packed. People came from all over: survivors, family members, healthcare professionals, law enforcement, academics. I spoke about my experience in broad strokes, protecting my privacy while offering enough detail that others could recognize themselves in my story. Control dressed up as love is still control, I told them. And love that demands surveillance, that restricts autonomy, that isolates you from your support system, that's not love. That's abuse. The response was overwhelming. After the lecture, people approached me with their own stories. Some had experienced similar situations with family members. Others had recognized the patterns in relationships they were currently in. Several were healthcare providers who wanted to learn how to identify victims of technology-enabled abuse. That's when the emails started arriving. Survivors from the international ring that Tyler had been part of reached out. They had heard about my case through media coverage, through FBI outreach, through survivor networks that had formed in the aftermath of the investigation. They wanted to share their stories. They wanted to know how to heal. They wanted to know that they weren't alone. I've spent countless hours connecting them with resources, with each other, with organizations that specialize in trauma recovery. Susan has provided pro bono medical consultations for those dealing with health issues stemming from the trauma. Jennifer has helped several of them pursue civil litigation against the organization that manufactured and distributed the devices. The international awareness campaign, Preventing Technology-Enabled Abuse, is now in its second phase, reaching countries across Europe, Asia, and North America. We've partnered with universities, medical associations, law enforcement agencies, and survivor advocacy groups. The Vital Ring case has become a cautionary tale, a teaching tool, a catalyst for change. 2 weeks ago, I received notification that I'd been selected to receive the Advocate for Justice Award from the International Association for Elder Rights. It was humbling and surreal, this recognition of work that emerged from the worst period of my life. But the moment that meant the most wasn't at an awards ceremony. It was last Sunday when Kevin, Susan, Jennifer, Emily, and I gathered at my apartment for a quiet dinner. No press, no cameras, no agenda, just the 5 of us, the people who had stood with me when I had nothing left, when I was broken and terrified and alone. We didn't talk about the award or the organization or the impact numbers. We talked about Kevin's plans to retire next year. We talked about Jennifer's daughter's upcoming wedding. We talked about Emily's new relationship with someone who respects her autonomy completely. We talked about Susan's expansion into geriatric medicine with a focus on abuse screening. And we talked about me, about how far I've come, about the person I'm becoming, about the life I'm building on my own terms. I lost control. I found myself saying, looking around the table at these people I love, but in losing it, I found myself. I found out who I am when I'm free to just be myself. And that person is someone I actually like. Susan reached over and squeezed my hand. There was no need for words between us anymore. We'd moved past the need to articulate everything. Some things are simply understood. As I lie in bed that night, I think about the journey from that morning in Grant Park, when I collapsed, when Susan found me, when everything changed. I think about the trial, about the verdict, about standing up in court and speaking my truth. I think about the organization we've built, the survivors we've helped, the awareness we've raised. Most of all, I think about this. I was imprisoned for a time, trapped by technology and manipulation, and the love of someone who didn't understand that love and control are opposites, not synonyms. But I'm free now. Not just from the ring, not just from Tyler's manipulation, but free to live my life exactly as I choose. Free to teach, free to build, free to love and be loved in return. Free to be myself. The scar tissue remains, it probably always will. Trauma doesn't disappear completely. It just becomes part of your story, integrated into who you are. But the wound has healed. The infection is gone, and real life continues forward. Looking back on everything I've shared with you, I want to be direct. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the warning signs. Don't mistake surveillance for love. Don't rationalize control as care. I lost a year of my life to a piece of technology, and the manipulation of someone I trusted. I watched my freedom disappear slowly, day by day, justified by words that sounded like devotion. I learned the hardest way possible that love and control are not the same thing. They are opposites. Here's what I know now. Real love gives freedom. Real love trusts. Real love respects your choices even when it disagrees with them. If someone is tracking your location, monitoring your conversations, isolating you from friends, that's not love. That's abuse, no matter how it's dressed up. I thank God for Susan, for Kevin, for Jennifer, and for Emily. I thank God for the strength to speak up when silence would have been easier. And I thank God that I found my way back to myself. But you don't have to wait for a crisis to learn this lesson. Start now. Protect your autonomy. Question control masquerading as concern. And if you see these patterns in your own life, reach out. Tell someone. Don't wait like I did. If this story resonated with you, please comment below and share your thoughts. If you know someone experiencing similar abuse, share this video with them. And if you want more stories about standing up, about healing, about finding your voice, subscribe to our channel. We're committed to bringing you stories that matter, conversations that matter, truths that matter. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this journey. Your presence here means more than you know. Before we go, I want to give you a heads up. Our next story contains some fictional elements crafted for educational purposes to illustrate important truths about relationships and autonomy. If heavy topics aren't what you're looking for right now, that's completely okay. Please choose content that serves you better. There's no judgment here, only respect for your boundaries. God bless you all.